This story is carefully designed using proven sleep science. The slow rhythm, soft tones, and gentle background sounds help your brain increase melatonin production, lower cortisol levels, and shift into a calm, restful state. Simply listen, breathe slowly, and allow your mind to drift for a deeper, higher quality sleep. You wake up, but you're not on land. You're breathing water, and towering above you is a city older than history itself. What if you suddenly woke up in an ancient underwater city? Chapter 1. The first breath. You open your eyes. The world around you is not the world you remember. Above, far above, shafts of light pierce through liquid blue, casting dancing patterns that shift and sway with a rhythm you have never seen before. The light is soft, filtered, as if the very air has been replaced by something thicker, something that cradles you with gentle hands. You blink and realize that blinking feels different here. Slower, more deliberate. The water, for you understand now that you are surrounded by water, presses against your eyelids with the softest touch, cool and welcoming. You should be drowning. You should be gasping, clawing toward whatever surface might exist above you. But instead, you breathe. The breath comes naturally, as if your lungs have always known this rhythm. In, and the water fills you with life. Out, and tiny bubbles dance away from your lips, spiraling upward toward that distant light. Each breath tastes of salt and something deeper, something mineral, rich, that coats your tongue with the memory of ancient stone. There is a metallic aftertaste, faint but persistent, as if the water itself has been touched by metal that has slept in darkness for countless years. You lift your hand, and it moves through the water with dreamlike slowness. Your fingers trail behind them a small current, and you watch, fascinated, as the water swirls around your skin. The temperature is neither warm nor cold, but something perfectly in between, like the embrace of someone who has been waiting for you for a very long time. Yet occasionally, without warning, a warmer current brushes against your arm, your cheek, your neck. These currents feel different. They feel alive, as if something vast and breathing has just passed by, leaving behind the warmth of its passage. Around you, towering columns rise from depths you cannot see. They are not columns of stone, though some stone remains at their hearts. They are columns of coral, built layer upon layer over centuries, perhaps millennia. The coral grows in impossible spirals, in delicate branches that fork and twist toward the light above. Some formations are white as bone. Others glow with soft pinks and oranges that seem to pulse with their own inner light. Between the columns, smaller structures cluster like barnacles, creating archways and chambers that beckon you to explore. The silence here is not empty. It is full, pregnant with sounds that your ears are only beginning to understand. There is the soft whisper of water moving against coral, a sound like silk being drawn across glass. There is the distant creak and groan of structures under pressure, but not the pressure of collapse. Rather, the pressure of time itself settling into the bones of this place. And underneath it all, so faint you are not sure if you are hearing it or feeling it, there is a rhythm, like a heartbeat, like breathing, like the slow, patient pulse of something enormous and ancient that sleeps far below. You try to remember how you came to be here, but your memories feel distant, as if they belong to someone else. You remember sunlight on your face, the feeling of dry air in your lungs, the solid ground beneath your feet. But those memories are fading now, becoming translucent, like the water around you. What matters is not where you came from, but where you are now, and the strange peace that has settled over you like a blanket woven from the ocean itself. Your body feels light, weightless. When you move your arms, you do not sink or rise, but simply drift, suspended in this liquid embrace. Your clothes. You realize you are still wearing clothes, though they now float around you like seaweed, billow and sway with each movement. The fabric has become something new underwater, softer, more alive. It brushes against your skin with a touch that is almost affectionate. You turn your head, and the movement sends small eddies spiraling through the water. To your left, a school of fish moves past in perfect formation. They are silver and blue, their scales catching the filtered light and throwing it back in brief, brilliant flashes. They do not seem startled by your presence. Instead, they curve around you with curiosity, some even brushing against your outstretched hand with fins as soft as feathers. Their touch leaves behind a tingling sensation, as if they have shared with you some secret knowledge of this underwater realm. As you watch them disappear into the coral maze, you notice something else moving in the distance. Shadows, large and graceful, gliding between the towering formations with a purpose you cannot understand. They are too far away to see clearly, but their movements suggest intelligence, awareness. You feel a small chill run through the water around you, or perhaps through you. It is impossible to tell where the water ends and you begin. The light above shifts, and you realize that what you took for sunlight might be something else entirely. The quality of illumination is too even, too patient. It does not flicker with the movement of waves above, does not change with the passage of clouds. Instead, it holds steady, as if this underwater world creates its own light, draws it up from some source deep within the coral city itself. You begin to move, not by swimming in any conventional sense, but by willing yourself forward through the water. Your body responds as if it has always known how to navigate this liquid space. You drift toward one of the coral columns, drawn by the intricate patterns that spiral up its surface. As you draw closer, you see that the patterns are not random. They are deliberate, carved, though whether by tool or by the patient work of countless sea creatures, you cannot tell. The carvings tell a story, though it is a story in a language you do not recognize. There are symbols that might be letters, pictures that might be words. Some images show figures with flowing limbs. Whether human or something else, it is hard to say. Other carvings depict great structures, cities beneath waves, gardens of coral that stretch beyond the horizon. And woven throughout, again and again, there are spirals. Spirals that seem to draw your eye inward, deeper, until you feel a strange dizziness and must look away. When you do look away, you notice that several small creatures have gathered around you. They are translucent, jellyfish-like, but with a complexity of form that suggests intelligence. They pulse with soft, bioluminescent light, creating brief constellations around your body. Their touch, when they brush against you, is electric, not painful, but startling, as if they are reading you, learning you, adding your presence to some vast underwater library of knowledge. You reach out to touch one, and it does not shy away. Your finger makes contact with its bell-like form, and suddenly you are filled with sensation that is not your own. For just a moment, you sense the water as this creature does, not as a barrier or a medium, but as home, as the very essence of existence. You feel the currents that carry nutrients and information across vast distances. You sense the vibrations of other life forms moving through the water, their heartbeats and breathing patterns, creating a symphony of presence that extends far beyond what your human ears can detect. The sensation fades as the creature drifts away, but it leaves behind a strange longing, a desire to understand more of this underwater world's secrets. You notice that your own heartbeat has changed. It is slower now, more in rhythm with the gentle pulse that seems to emanate from the city itself. The sound of it, usually so internal, so private, now seems to echo through the water around you, as if the ocean has made your heart its own. You continue to drift, moving between the coral towers with growing confidence. Each structure you pass reveals new wonders. Here, a formation that looks like a frozen waterfall, its surface covered in tiny polyps that wave like grass in a breeze that does not exist. There, an archway grown from living coral, its surface so smooth, it might have been polished by the hands of patient artisans. Through the archway, you glimpse chambers filled with soft, phosphorescent light, and the suggestion of movement within. Inhabitants of this underwater city, going about their business in the eternal twilight of the deep. As you explore, You begin to notice that your movements are being observed, not by the obvious sea life, the fish and jellies and countless tiny creatures that populate this underwater garden, but by something else. Something that watches from the spaces between, from the shadows cast by the coral formations, from the deeper waters that stretch away into blue, black mystery. You cannot see these watchers directly. When you turn to look, there is nothing there but water and shadow and the gentle sway of sea plants. But the sensation of being observed, of being catalogued and considered, grows stronger with each passing moment. It is not an unfriendly presence, this watching. It feels more like curiosity, like the attention of a host who has been expecting guests and is pleased to finally receive them. The water around you shimmers, and for a moment you think you see faces in the patterns of light and shadow. Ancient faces, wise faces, faces that have been worn smooth by centuries of water and time. But when you blink, they are gone, leaving behind only the memory of being seen, of being welcomed into a community that exists just beyond the edge of your understanding. Your breathing has settled into a rhythm so natural that you no longer think about it. The water flows in and out of your lungs like the most natural thing in the world, carrying with it not just oxygen, but something else. A sense of belonging, of coming home to a place you have never been but have always known. Each breath tastes of history, of stories told in languages made of current and pressure, of time measured not in minutes or hours, but in the slow accumulation of coral and the patient migration of continents. The light above has shifted again, taking on a deeper blue quality that suggests the passage of time, though time itself feels different here. Minutes might be hours, hours might be years. The urgency that once drove your surface life has dissolved into the water around you, leaving behind a profound sense of peace, tinged with just the slightest tremor of anticipation. Something is coming. Something is waiting. Something ancient and patient has been disturbed from its slumber by your arrival, and it is slowly beginning to take notice. You drift deeper into the coral city, drawn by currents both physical and metaphysical, leaving behind the world you once knew and embracing the mystery that surrounds you. The first breath was just the beginning. Now comes the true exploration, the real awakening to the wonders and terrors that sleep beneath the waves. Behind you, in the spaces between the coral towers, shadows move with purpose. They are not following you, not exactly. They are simply acknowledging your presence, recording it, welcoming you to a place where the boundaries between dream and reality, between visitor and inhabitant, between self and ocean, have long since dissolved into the eternal blue. The water whispers around you, carrying messages in languages older than words, and you understand, with a certainty that bypasses rational thought, that your real journey is only just beginning. Chapter 2 echoes of the deep. A sound reaches you through the water, faint at first, like the memory of music heard from a great distance. It is a chime, low and resonant, though no bell could ring in this liquid world. The sound seems to emerge from the city itself, from the coral walls and the spaces between them, as if the very architecture has found its voice. You pause in your drifting exploration, your body swaying gently with currents that carry the echo past you, around you, through you. The chime comes again, clearer this time, and with it a vibration that you feel in your bones. It is not unpleasant, this feeling. Rather like standing too close to a great organ when the lowest notes are played. Except that here you are surrounded by the instrument, held within its resonating chamber. Your chest tightens slightly, not with alarm, but with recognition, as if some deep part of you has been waiting all your life to hear this sound. You turn toward the source of the chiming, though direction seems somehow fluid in this place, where up and down are suggestions rather than certainties. The movement carries you past a cluster of smaller coral formations, their surfaces worn smooth by the patient caress of centuries. Fish dart between them, not the silver school you encountered before, but creatures of deeper hues, midnight blues, shot through with veins of electric green, purple so dark it is almost black, reds that pulse like the embers of some underwater fire. The buildings that begin to emerge from the coral maze are unmistakably structures created by intelligence, by design, by purpose. Yet they are not buildings as you have ever known buildings to be. They rise from the seafloor like natural growths, their walls curved and flowing, following the logic of water and current, rather than the rigid geometry of human architecture. Some are partially collapsed, their roofs caved in and filled with gardens of sea anemones that sway in the gentle currents like alien flowers. Others stand intact, their windows dark but somehow inviting, as if they wait patiently for occupants who left long ago but might one day return. Seaweed drapes these structures like curtains, long green and brown fronds that dance with the water's movement. When you drift too close, some of the fronds brush against your skin, and you are surprised by their texture. Not slimy or unpleasant, as you might have expected, but soft, almost velvety. They leave behind a tingling sensation, as if they have recognized something in your touch and marked you with their approval. The chime sounds a third time, and now you can sense its direction more clearly. It comes from deeper within the city, from structures larger and more complex than these outer dwellings. You follow the call, moving between buildings that grow taller and stranger as you progress. Here, a tower that spirals upward in a perfect helix, its surface covered in what might once have been windows but are now home to colonies of bioluminescent organisms that pulse with slow, hypnotic rhythms. They're a series of interconnected domes, their surfaces so overgrown with coral that they look more like natural formations than constructed buildings. Yet their symmetry betrays their artificial origin. As you navigate this underwater cityscape, you become aware of movement in your peripheral vision. Shapes that glide between the buildings with purpose, always just beyond the edge of clear sight. When you turn your head to look directly, they seem to dissolve into shadow and current, leaving behind only the impression of grace, of intelligence, of something that observes without wishing to be observed in return. These shapes are larger than the fish, more deliberate in their movements than the jellies and other sea creatures that populate the coral gardens. They move with the fluid certainty of beings perfectly adapted to this environment. Yet there is something about them that suggests they are more than simple sea life. They are too aware, too purposeful. When one passes close enough that you catch a glimpse of its outline, you see something that might be humanoid in shape, though elongated, adapted, changed by countless years beneath the waves. The water around you carries more than just the echoes of that haunting chime. It carries sense, or what your transformed senses interpret as sense in this liquid world. There is the clean, mineral smell of stone worn smooth by water, the rich organic scent of living coral, and underneath it all, something else. Something that smells of age, of mystery, of stories that have been sleeping in the dark for so long they have forgotten their own endings. You taste these scents on your tongue, in the water that flows through your lungs with each breath. The metallic aftertaste you first noticed has grown stronger, more complex. Now it carries hints of copper and silver, of metals that have been touched by salt water and time until they have become something new. Something that exists only in places where the ocean has had centuries to work its transforming magic. Your movements through the water have become more natural, more instinctive. You no longer think about how to navigate this three-dimensional space. Your body has learned the language of current and buoyancy, of moving with the water rather than against it. When you wish to rise, you think yourself lighter, and the water lifts you gently upward. When you wish to descend, you allow yourself to grow heavy, and you sink through the blue layers like a stone wrapped in silk. This newfound grace in movement brings you to the entrance of a structure that dwarfs all the others you have encountered. It might once have been a great hall, or a temple, or something else entirely for which your language has no word. Its walls rise in sweeping curves that seem to breathe with the rhythm of the ocean itself. The entrance is not a door, but an opening, an invitation, shaped like the mouth of some great shell. Water flows through it in patterns that suggest currents guided by invisible architecture, creating a sense of passage, of threshold, of crossing from one realm to another. You hesitate at the entrance, not from fear, but from a sudden awareness of the significance of the moment. To enter this place would be to accept something, to commit to a path that you do not yet fully understand. The chiming sound comes again, now clearly emanating from within the structure, and with it a warmth spreads through the water around you. It is the warmth of welcome, of invitation, of a patience so vast that it can wait for ones and still greet each visitor as if they are the first and most important guest. As you drift toward the entrance, small lights begin to appear in the water around you. They are not the harsh, artificial lights of the surface world, but something gentler, more organic. Some pulse like tiny hearts. Others glow with a steady radiance that seems to have no source. They cluster around you as you move, creating a constellation that travels with you, lighting your way without ever feeling intrusive or demanding. The moment you cross the threshold, the water changes. It becomes denser, more supportive, as if you are moving from air into something richer, more nourishing. The temperature shifts too, becoming warmer in some places, cooler in others, creating layers and currents that you can feel against different parts of your body simultaneously. It is like being wrapped in liquid silk that has been woven from temperature itself. Inside, the structure reveals itself to be even more magnificent than its exterior suggested. The ceiling. If it can be called a ceiling in a place where everything flows into everything else. Arches high above, supported by columns that are clearly grown rather than built. These columns are living things, though whether plant or animal or something else entirely is impossible to determine. They pulse with slow bioluminescence, creating waves of light that travel from floor to ceiling and back again in patterns too complex to follow, but too beautiful to ignore. The walls are covered in murals, though calling them murals hardly does justice to what you see. These are stories told in living coral, in patterns of growth and color that have been guided over centuries to create images of incredible complexity and beauty. You drift closer to examine one section and find yourself looking at what appears to be a map, not of land masses and oceans as you would expect, but of currents, of the invisible rivers that flow through the sea. Other sections show figures that might be human, though change adapted, evolved. They dance through underwater gardens. They gather around structures that pulse with light. They raise their arms toward sources of illumination that seem to come from within them rather than from any external sun. As you move deeper into the hall, the chiming sound grows stronger, more complex. You realize now that it is not one sound, but many, a harmony created by multiple sources resonating together. The sound seems to be coming from the structure itself, as if the building is a vast instrument played by the currents and pressures of the deep ocean. The water carries the music through your body, and you feel it in your bones, in your blood, in the steady rhythm of your transformed heartbeat. It is music without melody in any conventional sense, yet it tells a story that your soul understands even when your mind cannot translate the meaning. It speaks of age beyond counting, of patient growth, of adaptation and change, and the slow, inexorable power of water to reshape everything it touches. Around you, the watching presence grows stronger. You sense attention focused on you from multiple directions, though still you cannot see the watchers clearly. They remain in the periphery of your vision, in the spaces between light and shadow, observing your reactions to this place, your responses to the music and the beauty and the overwhelming sense of ancientness that permeates everything. One of the shadows detaches itself from a column and drifts closer. Still, you cannot see it clearly. It seems to exist just beyond the edge of focus, as if your eyes are not yet adapted to perceive what it truly is. But you sense intelligence there, and something that might be kindness, or at least benign curiosity. It circles you slowly, and where it passes, the water grows slightly warmer, as if heated by its presence. You try to speak, to offer some greeting or acknowledgement, but sound behaves strangely here. Your voice, when it emerges, is transformed by the water into something liquid and flowing, more music than speech. The words you intended to say become a collection of tones and harmonics that blend with the chiming of the hall itself. Yet somehow, impossibly, you sense that you have been understood. The shadow, being, responds with sounds of its own, not words but something deeper, something that bypasses language entirely and speaks directly to the part of you that understands music, emotion, the fundamental rhythms of existence. Its communication carries images, sensations, fragments of meaning that assemble themselves in your consciousness like pieces of a vast, complex puzzle. You understand that this place has been waiting for you, though not you specifically, rather for someone like you, someone from the surface world who could make the transition, who could breathe the water and hear the music and see the beauty without being destroyed by the strangeness of it all. You understand that you are not the first to arrive here. though the others came so long ago that they have become part of the city itself, woven into its coral walls and flowing currents. The realization brings with it a moment of vertigo, a loosening of your connection to the self you once were. For just an instant, you feel yourself beginning to dissolve into the water around you, to become part of the endless circulation of current and tide that connects all things in this underwater realm. It is not a frightening sensation, quite the opposite. It feels like coming home, like returning to a source you never knew you had left. But something pulls you back, some stubborn thread of individuality that refuses to be dissolved just yet. You are still yourself, still separate, still capable of choice and decision and the peculiar loneliness that comes with being a single consciousness in a vast universe. The shadow being seems to sense this resistance and drifts back, giving you space, time, the freedom to explore and understand at your own pace. You continue through the hall, past more murals that tell stories in languages of growth and decay, past alcoves filled with objects whose purposes you cannot guess, but whose beauty is undeniable. Some appear to be instruments, though what music they might make, you cannot imagine. Others look like tools, though for what tasks they were designed remains a mystery. All of them share a quality of organic curves and flowing lines that suggest they were grown rather than manufactured, shaped by will and patience rather than force. The chiming reaches a crescendo, and the entire hall seems to resonate with sound and light. For a moment, you see the space as it might have been in its prime, filled with beings like the Shadow Watcher, their forms graceful and elongated, perfectly adapted to life in the deep. You see them moving through the water in complex patterns that might be dance or ritual, or simply the way they chose to exist in this liquid world. The vision lasts only a heartbeat before fading back into the quiet mystery of the present, but it leaves behind a profound sense of loss, of beauty interrupted, of a civilization that chose to sleep rather than die. As the sound fades to its previous gentle level, you notice that more of the shadow beings have gathered around you. They maintain their distance, but their presence creates a sense of ceremony, of significance. You understand that your exploration of this hall has been a test of sorts, not of worthiness, but of compatibility. They needed to know if you could see what they see, hear what they hear, understand the language of coral and current that is their native tongue. The water around you pulses with approval, with welcome, with an invitation to go deeper still. The hall has been just the beginning, an introduction to the true wonders that wait in the heart of this underwater city. Your breathing has synchronized completely now with the rhythm of the place. Your heartbeat has matched the slow pulse that emanates from the coral walls. You are becoming part of the music, part of the story, part of the eternal dance between water and stone that has been playing here since before your species learned to dream of the sea. Behind you, the entrance to the hall remains open, a pathway back to the simpler coral gardens and the blue waters beyond. But ahead, deeper into the structure, other passages beckon. The chiming calls to you from those depths, promising revelations and transformations that you can barely begin to imagine. The shadow beings drift closer, and you sense their eagerness, their desire to show you marvels that have been hidden in the deep for longer than human memory. They have been alone with their beauty and their music and their patient dreams for so very long. Your arrival has awakened something in them, a joy in sharing, in revealing the wonders they have tended in solitude. The water carries you forward, deeper into the heart of the coral city, while the echoes of the deep sing your welcome home. Chapter 3: The Coral Halls. The passage that leads deeper into the structure draws you forward with a current that feels almost sentient, as if the building itself is guiding your movement through its liquid corridors. Here, the architecture becomes something beyond human imagination. Walls that curve and flow like frozen waves, ceilings that arch overhead in spirals that make your eyes water when you try to follow their patterns to completion. Everything is alive, growing, breathing with the slow patience of geological time. You enter what can only be described as a hall, though no hall you have ever seen could compare to this vast underwater cathedral. The space stretches away from you in dimensions that seem to shift as you move through the water, sometimes intimate and embrace, like sometimes opening into vaulting chambers that disappear into blue, black mystery above. The walls are not made of coral in the way you have come to understand it. They are coral, living and growing, their surfaces rippling with colors that have no names in any surface language. The coral here is ancient beyond measure, yet it pulses with vitality that makes your skin tingle when you drift too close. Formations spiral upward in helixes, so perfect they might have been drawn by a mathematician's compass, if that mathematician understood the secret geometry of water and time. Other growths branch and divide in patterns that remind you of blood vessels or river deltas or the neural pathways of some vast underwater brain. When you move through the water between these formations, you can feel the slight warmth they generate, as if they are not just alive, but thinking, processing, responding to your presence with something that might be curiosity or welcome or recognition. The colors are what steal your breath. If breath could still be stolen from someone who has learned to extract life from water itself. Here, a section of wall glows with soft pink luminescence that gradually shades into coral orange, then deepens to red so rich it seems to have weight and texture. There, formations of white coral create intricate lacework patterns, their surfaces covered in tiny polyps that wave like miniature hands greeting your passage. Beyond them, sections of deep purple coral seem to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating pockets of shadow that feel pregnant with mystery. But it is not just the colors that make these halls extraordinary. It is the way they move. The entire structure breathes, expanding and contracting with a rhythm so slow it takes you several minutes to recognize it as motion at all. The walls pulse gently, creating currents that carry you along predetermined paths through the vast space. When you try to resist these currents, to swim against them toward some feature that has caught your attention, the water becomes denser, more resistant, gently but firmly encouraging you to follow the intended route. Along the walls, carved into the living coral itself, are the stories. Not stories as you have ever understood them, with beginning and middle and end, but something more fundamental. Visual narratives that seem to shift and change as you watch them, telling different tales depending on the angle from which they are viewed, the distance from which they are observed, the state of mind you bring to their interpretation. One section depicts figures that might once have been human, though they have been transformed by their long residence in the deep. Their limbs are elongated, graceful, their movements through the carved water flowing and dance-like. Their faces, when you can make them out, show expressions of profound peace, as if they have found in these depths something that the surface world could never provide. They gather around structures that pulse with carved light. They tend gardens of stone coral. They raise their arms toward currents that flow overhead like underwater rivers. Another section shows the city in what might have been its prime before the coral overgrew the original architecture, when the structures were still clearly recognizable as buildings rather than organic growths. Even then, the architecture was fluid, organic, following curves and spirals that worked with water rather than against it. The carved inhabitants move through this ancient cityscape with purpose and joy. Their elongated forms perfectly suited to their liquid environment. As you drift closer to examine one particularly complex section of carving, the coral beneath your fingertips warms perceptibly. The surface, which appeared smooth from a distance, reveals itself to be covered in tiny, intricate details, scales and patterns and textures so fine they seem to continue infinitely inward. Like a fractal made manifest in living stone. When you press your palm against the warm surface, you feel a pulse, slow and strong, like the heartbeat of something vast and patient. The warmth spreads up your arm, not unpleasant, but startling in its intensity. For a moment, your vision shifts, and instead of seeing the carved wall, you see through it into the very structure of the coral itself. You perceive the slow circulation of nutrients, the patient accumulation of calcium carbonate, the endless cycles of growth and renewal that have created this masterpiece over countless centuries. You sense the intelligence that guides this growth, not conscious in any way you would recognize, but purposeful nonetheless, shaping beauty according to principles that exist somewhere between instinct and art. The vision fades, leaving you breathless, or what passes for breathless, when your lungs are filled with water that sustains rather than drowns. Your hand remains pressed against the warm coral, and through it you continue to feel the slow pulse of the city's vast heart. The rhythm syncs with your own heartbeat, and for a moment you cannot tell where the coral ends and you begin. Around you, the shadow beings have gathered in greater numbers. They no longer hide at the edges of perception, but drift openly through the halls, their forms becoming clearer as your eyes continue to adapt to this underwater reality. They are beautiful in a way that makes your chest tight with longing. Humanoid but perfected, their bodies flowing and graceful, their movements through the water so natural they might have been born from the currents themselves. Their skin has a translucent quality that allows you to see hints of the structures beneath, not bones as you understand them, but something more flexible, more adapted to the pressures of the deep. When they move, soft bioluminescent patterns pulse along their limbs, creating trails of light that fade slowly in the water behind them. Their faces, when you can see them clearly enough to make out features, are elongated and refined, with large eyes that seem to hold depths within depths, like looking into pools that contain entire oceans. One of them approaches you directly, moving through the water with a grace that makes you suddenly aware of how clumsy your own movements must appear. They extends a hand toward you, and you see that their fingers are longer than human fingers, webbed with translucent membranes that catch the light like stained glass. When their fingertips brush against your arm, the sensation is electric, not painful but intensely present, as if every nerve ending in your body has suddenly awakened. Through that touch comes communication that bypasses language entirely. Images flow directly into your mind, not your surface mind that thinks in words and concepts, but some deeper level of consciousness that understands meaning without translation. You see the city as it was built, not by hands and tools, but by will and patience, coral guided over centuries to grow in specific patterns, shaped by minds that thought in geological time. You see the first inhabitants, beings who came from somewhere else, whether another world or simply another part of this, one transformed beyond recognition, and chose this underwater realm as their new home. You see the long years of adaptation, the slow changes that allowed them to thrive in the depths, breathing water as easily as you once breathed air, their bodies becoming more fluid, more suited to three-dimensional movement through liquid space. You see the development of their art, their science, their philosophy, all adapted to an environment where time moves differently, where patience is not a virtue but a necessity, where beauty grows rather than being made. And you see yourself, or rather, you see the choice that lies before you. You can return to the surface world, carrying with you the memory of this place, but never truly belonging to it. Or you can stay, can allow the same patient transformation to work its changes on your body and mind, can become part of this underwater civilization that has been waiting, dreaming, growing in the depths, while the surface world forgot that such wonders were possible. The choice does not demand an immediate answer. These beings have waited this long. They can wait longer. But the option hangs in the water around you like a physical presence, something you can almost reach out and touch. The very coral seems to pulse more strongly in response to your consideration, as if it too has an opinion on your future, as if it too has grown fond of your presence in these ancient halls. You drift away from the shadow, being, needing space to think, to feel, to understand what is happening to you. In this place where understanding seems to come through the skin rather than through the mind. The halls stretch away in all directions, offering countless passages to explore, countless wonders to discover. In one direction, you glimpse chambers filled with what might be libraries, not books as you would recognize them, but coral formations that seem to store information in their very structure. Knowledge preserved in patterns of growth that could be read by those who understood their language. In another direction, you sense rather than see vast spaces filled with what might be art. Sculptures grown from living coral, their forms so alien and beautiful that your human aesthetic sense struggles to categorize them. They exist in a realm beyond pretty or ugly, beyond meaningful or decorative. They simply are. Perfect expressions of an aesthetic that has developed in isolation from any surface influence. The water carries sense to you, not sense as you would understand them in air, but the underwater equivalent, molecular information that your transformed senses interpret as fragrance. There is the clean mineral smell of ancient stone, The rich organic scent of living coral, something that might be incense, if incense could burn underwater. And underneath it all, the metallic tang that speaks of deep waters and geological time and pressures that could crush surface dwellings into powder. Your movements through this space have become a kind of dance, though you are not conscious of choreographing it. The water carries you in spirals and curves that seem to complement the architecture around you. Your body responding to currents and pressures you cannot consciously perceive, but which guide you nonetheless toward features of particular beauty or significance. Sometimes you find yourself pausing before a section of carving, studying details that seem to shift and change as you watch. Other times you are drawn to chambers where the coral grows in formations so complex they make your eyes water. Yet you cannot look away from their mathematical perfection. In one such chamber, you discover what might be a garden, though it bears no resemblance to any garden that ever grew beneath the sun. Here, coral formations rise from the floor in shapes that suggest flowers. If flowers could be made of living stone and pulsed with their own inner light, the petals of these coral blooms are translucent, catching and refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns that dance across the chamber walls. When you drift close to one of these formations, it responds to your presence, its petals opening wider, its bioluminescent core brightening as if pleased by your attention. Between the coral flowers, schools of tiny fish move in patterns so precise they might be choreographed. Their scales shimmer with colors that shift and change as they move, creating living constellations that swirl through the water in response to currents you cannot detect. When your movement disturbs their formation, they scatter briefly before reforming in new patterns that seem to incorporate your presence into their design, as if you have become part of their aquatic ballet. The ceiling of this garden chamber is covered in formations that hang downward like stalactites, but these too are alive, pulsing gently with soft light. From their tips, streams of tiny bubbles rise upward, though what creates these bubbles in the depths of the ocean you cannot fathom. The bubbles catch the light as they rise, creating vertical columns of sparkling illumination that divide the chamber into sections, each containing its own collection of impossible coral flowers. You notice that your breathing has changed again, becoming deeper, more rhythmic. Each inhalation seems to draw not just oxygen from the water, but something else. A sense of peace so profound it makes your limbs heavy with relaxation. The water tastes different here too, sweeter, with undertones that remind you of fresh spring water, filtered through layers of mineral-rich stone. Sun, the metallic aftertaste that has been your constant companion since awakening in this underwater realm has mellowed into something almost pleasant, like the taste of coins held too long in a child's mouth. As you explore the garden chamber, you become aware that the shadow beings are tending it. Though their methods of gardening are unlike anything you could have imagined, they move among the coral formations with infinite patience. Their elongated hands trailing through the water in gestures that might be caresses or might be something more purposeful. Where they touch, the coral responds, growing brighter, shifting its patterns of bioluminescence, adjusting its form in subtle ways that enhance the overall harmony of the space. One of the beings notices your observation and approaches, moving through the water with that fluid grace that you are beginning to recognize as their natural state of being. This close, you can see that what you took for skin is actually something more complex. A surface that shifts between translucent and opaque, that seems to contain depths within depths, as if their bodies are made of living water given form and purpose. They extend their hand toward one of the coral flowers, and you watch in fascination as the formation responds to their proximity. The petals, which had been a soft pink, deepen to rose, then to red, then to a purple so deep it seems to absorb light. The being's hand moves in a circular pattern, and the coral's bioluminescent core begins to pulse in rhythm with the movement, creating a hypnotic display that seems to communicate meaning you cannot quite grasp. The being turns to you, their large eyes reflecting the coral's changing light, and you understand that they are offering to teach you, to show you how to speak this language of light and growth and patient tending. Their communication comes not through words or even the direct mental contact you experienced earlier, but through demonstration, through invitation to participate in this ancient art of coral cultivation. You extend your own hand toward the coral flower, mimicking the being's circular gesture. At first, nothing happens. The coral continues its slow pulse, unchanged by your presence. But the being moves closer, their hand covering yours, guiding your movements with a touch that sends warmth up your arm and into your chest. Under their guidance, you begin to feel something. A connection, faint at first, then growing stronger, between your intention and the coral's response. The flower's color shifts, becoming brighter, more vibrant. Its petals open wider, and from its center, new formations begin to grow, tiny branches that spiral outward in patterns that mirror the larger architecture of the halls around you. You are shaping living stone with thought and touch, participating in an art form that requires not skill in any conventional sense, but a kind of empathy, an ability to feel what the coral wants to become and guide it toward that perfect expression of its potential. The sensation is intoxicating. Through your connection with the coral, you sense the vast network that connects all the living stone in the city. Miles of interconnected growth that shares nutrients, information, perhaps even something analogous to thoughts. You feel the slow pulse of the city's life force. The circulation of whatever energy keeps this vast organism alive and growing. For a moment, you are part of that network, your consciousness distributed across the entire underwater civilization, experiencing it not as a collection of separate structures, but as a single, unified entity that thinks in geological time and dreams in patterns of growth and light. The experience is overwhelming, and you pull back, your hand separating from the coral with a sensation like tearing silk. The being beside you radiates understanding, not disappointment in your withdrawal, but recognition of the adjustment required. The time needed for a surface dweller to fully comprehend the magnitude of what they have encountered here. They guide you away from the garden chamber, deeper into the coral halls where new wonders await. Here, you discover chambers that serve purposes you can only guess at. Spaces where the coral has grown into formations that might be furniture if furniture could be alive and responsive to the needs of its users. You see alcoves filled with objects whose beauty is matched only by their mystery. Sculptures that seem to move when you are not looking directly at them. Sun arrangements of smaller coral formations that create complex harmonies of light and color that change as you move around them. In one chamber, you find what might be a library, though the knowledge is stored not in books, but in the coral itself. The walls are covered in formations that spiral and branch in patterns too complex for random growth, too purposeful for mere decoration. When you touch one of these formations, images flash through your mind. Star charts of constellations that might exist above the surface of some other ocean. Mathematical concepts that describe the flow of water through impossible geometries. Histories of events that might have occurred in this underwater realm over the centuries of its existence. The shadow, beings who guide you, seem pleased by your fascination, your willingness to explore and experience rather than simply observe. They show you chambers where the coral has been grown into musical instruments, or at least formations that create haunting harmonies when water flows through them in certain patterns. The music they produce is unlike anything from the surface world, built on mathematical relationships that exist only in liquid environments, creating emotions that your land-born heart struggles to name. Throughout your exploration, you are aware of the changes occurring within your own body. Your movements through the water have become even more natural, more instinctive. Your breathing has synchronized completely with the rhythm of the coral city, drawing from the water not just oxygen but something else. Nutrients perhaps, or energy, or simply the life force that permeates this entire underwater civilization. Your skin has developed a sensitivity to pressure and current that allows you to navigate the three-dimensional maze of the halls with increasing confidence. Most disturbing and wondrous of all, you begin to sense the beginnings of your own transformation. When you hold your hand up to examine it in the soft coral light, you see that your fingers have grown slightly longer, more elegant. The webbing between them, which you first noticed as a trick of the water's refraction, is becoming more pronounced, more real. Your skin has taken on a subtle translucency that allows hints of your circulatory system to show through, creating patterns of light and shadow that pulse with your heartbeat. The realization should terrify you, but instead it fills you with a strange sense of rightness, of evolution in progress, of becoming something better suited to this environment that has claimed your heart. The surface world, with its harsh air and relentless gravity, its bright sun and solid ground, seems increasingly like a half-remembered dream from another person's life. The shadow beings sense your growing acceptance, your willingness to embrace the transformation that life in their city requires. They gather around you more closely now, their bioluminescent patterns creating complex displays that might be celebration or welcome, or simply the joy of no longer being alone with their wonders. Their presence no longer feels like observation. It feels like family, like the embrace of beings who understand what you are becoming, because they too made this choice long ago when the world above was younger and the ocean called to them with the same irresistible voice that now calls to you. The coral halls stretch away in all directions, promising endless exploration, endless wonder, endless opportunities to learn the arts of this underwater civilization. Time has become fluid here, as liquid as the environment that surrounds you. Minutes might be hours, hours might be days, days might be years. The surface world's obsession with measurement and schedule has dissolved into the eternal now of the deep, where change happens according to its own patient rhythm, and rushing is a concept that has no meaning. You drift deeper into the halls, your transformation progressing with each breath of water, each touch of coral, each moment of communion with the beings who have chosen you as their newest student in the arts of underwater existence. Behind you, the path back to the surface still exists, but it grows fainter with each passing moment, less real, less important than the wonders that beckon you forward into the heart of the coral city. The walls around you pulse with renewed life, and you realize that your presence here has awakened something that had been dormant, waiting. The city is growing again, expanding, adding new chambers and passages and gardens to accommodate its newest resident. You are no longer just exploring an ancient ruin. You are participating in its resurrection. Your very presence catalyzing a renaissance of growth and beauty that will continue for centuries to come. The coral halls embrace you with their living walls, and you surrender to their ancient wisdom, ready to learn what it truly means to belong to the deep. Chapter 4. The Watchers. At the edge of your vision, always at the very periphery, where sight becomes suggestion, they gather. You have grown accustomed to their presence over what might be hours, or days, or weeks. Time moves so strangely here that you have stopped trying to measure it in the old ways. But now, as you drift through chambers that grow ever stranger and more wonderful, you become aware that the Watchers are no longer content to observe from the shadows. They are emerging, revealing themselves, allowing you to see them as they truly are. The first clear sighting comes as you round a spiraling formation of coral that towers from floor to ceiling like a frozen tornado made of living stone. There, suspended in the blue-green water perhaps 20 feet away, floats a figure that makes your transformed heart skip several beats. It is undeniably humanoid, but elongated, refined, perfected by centuries of adaptation to this liquid environment. Its skin has the translucent quality of deep water, allowing glimpses of the elegant structures within, not bones as you understand them, but something more flexible, more suited to the pressures and freedoms of three-dimensional aquatic movement. But it is the eyes that stop your breath entirely. Large, luminous, filled with depths that seem to contain entire oceans. They regard you with an intelligence so profound it makes you suddenly aware of how limited your surface-born understanding truly is. These are eyes that have seen the slow dance of continents, that have watched the patient accumulation of sediment into stone, that have observed the rise and fall of species across geological ages. They are ancient beyond your ability to comprehend. Yet they look upon you with something that might be kindness, or curiosity, or recognition. The being makes no move to approach or retreat. It simply watches, its form swaying gently with currents that you cannot detect, its elongated limbs moving in slow, hypnotic patterns that might be some form of communication or might simply be the way it exists in this liquid space. Along its arms and legs, soft patterns of bioluminescence pulse in slow rhythms that seem to echo the heartbeat of the coral city itself. When it moves, trails of light follow its gestures, creating temporary constellations in the water that fades slowly. Like the memory of dreams upon waking, you try to move closer, but the being maintains its distance, not retreating exactly, but somehow remaining always just beyond your reach while never appearing to swim away. It is as if it exists in a slightly different relationship to the water, able to control its position through means that your still, transforming body cannot yet master. Its observation of you is patient, thorough, containing neither judgment nor expectation. It simply sees you, knows you, accepts your presence with a calm that suggests it has been expecting your arrival for longer than you can imagine. As you continue your exploration of the deeper chambers, you become aware that there are others. Many others. They drift through the coral passages like living currents, their forms so perfectly adapted to the underwater environment that they seem more like animated water than separate beings. Some are larger than the first watcher, their limbs stretched to even greater elegance by their long residence in the deep. Others are smaller, more delicate. Their movements through the water, so graceful they might be dancers performing for an audience of coral and fish. All of them share that same quality of ancient intelligence, of minds that think in timescales vast beyond human comprehension. When they look at you, you feel seen in ways that the surface world never prepared you for. Not just your physical form, but your thoughts, your potential, the slow changes that are occurring in your body and consciousness as this underwater realm works its patient transformation upon you. Their observation is not intrusive. It carries no sense of violation or judgment. Instead, it feels like being recognized by family members you never knew you had. Beings who understand what you are becoming, because they too made this journey from surface to depth, from air, breathing to water, breathing from the harsh simplicities of land to the complex beauties of the sea. You notice that your own vision is changing, becoming more sensitive to the subtle variations in light and shadow that fill these underwater spaces. Details that were invisible to your surface, adapted eyes now stand out clearly. You can see the individual polyps that make up the coral formations, each one pulsing with its own tiny rhythm of life. You can detect the nearly invisible threads of current that flow through the water, carrying nutrients and information across vast distances. Most remarkably, you are beginning to see the watchers themselves more clearly, as if your eyes are finally learning to focus properly in this liquid environment. One of the beings approaches closer than any have before, moving through the water with a fluidity that makes you acutely aware of how clumsy your own movements still are. This one is different from the others, smaller, more delicate, with patterns of bioluminescence that pulse in complex sequences along its limbs and torso. Its approach sends ripples of warmth through the water around you, not the physical warmth of heated liquid, but something else, something that touches you on levels you are only beginning to understand. When it extends its hand toward you, you see that its fingers are even longer and more elegant than you had realized. Webbed with membranes so fine, they are almost invisible, except where they catch and refract the ambient light. The webbing extends further up the arms than you had noticed before, creating patterns that remind you of the delicate structure of leaves or the wings of some impossible butterfly, adapted for flight through liquid rather than air. You extend your own hand in response, and when your fingers touch, the contact is electric in the most literal sense, not painful, but intensely present, as if every nerve ending in your body has suddenly awakened to possibilities you never knew existed. Through that touch comes communication that bypasses every form of language you have ever known. The being shares with you its memories, though calling them memories hardly does justice to the richness of what you experience. You see the city as it was in its youth, when the coral was still growing according to the original plans, when the architecture was new and strange and beautiful. You witness the arrival of the first inhabitants, refugees from some distant catastrophe, beings who chose the deep waters as their sanctuary and slowly, patiently, lovingly adapted themselves to life in the abyss. You experience their gradual transformation, the slow changes that allowed them to thrive in this liquid environment. You feel their growing connection to the coral city, the way their consciousness began to merge with the living architecture around them until the boundaries between inhabitant and habitat became fluid, permeable. You understand that they are not just living in the city, they are part of it. Their life force intertwined with its own, their thoughts contributing to the vast, slow intelligence that guides the coral's growth and shapes its dreams. The vision fades, but the connection remains. Through the being's touch, you can sense the vast network of consciousness that permeates the entire city, a collective awareness that spans the coral walls and the flowing passages and the countless chambers filled with wonders. You realize that the watchers are not separate individuals as you understand individuality, but nodes in this larger consciousness, focal points of awareness that can act independently while remaining part of the greater whole. The being releases your hand, but the warmth of connection lingers in your transformed flesh. You understand now why they have been watching you, studying you, waiting patiently for you to reach this point in your own transformation. They needed to know if you could make this connection, if your consciousness was flexible enough to join their collective while retaining enough individual awareness to contribute something new to their ancient wisdom. Around you, more watchers emerge from the shadows between coral formations. They move in patterns that suggest ritual, ceremony, celebration. Their bioluminescent displays grow brighter, more complex, creating a light show that transforms the chamber into something like a cathedral made of living illumination. The water itself seems to respond to their presence, becoming denser, more supportive, carrying their movements and yours with unusual grace. You realize that you are being welcomed, formally and finally, into their community. The choice that has been hovering at the edges of your consciousness throughout your exploration of this underwater realm is crystallizing into something immediate and real. You can feel the changes in your body accelerating, your breathing becoming even more efficient at extracting oxygen from water, your skin developing the subtle translucency that marks the true inhabitants of the deep, your senses adapting further to perceive the full spectrum of underwater sensation. But more than the physical changes, you feel the expansion of your consciousness, the gradual opening of your awareness to include not just your own thoughts and sensations, but the vast, slow thoughts of the coral city itself. You begin to perceive the careful circulation of nutrients through the living architecture, the patient communication between distant chambers, the dreams that flow through the coral's crystalline structure like music made of light and growth. The watchers circle you now, their movements creating currents that massage your transforming body, that ease the changes occurring in your organs and bones and nervous system. Their presence is medicine, comfort, guidance for a transition that might otherwise be frightening in its scope and irreversibility. They have all been through this transformation, all made the choice to abandon their original forms and embrace something new, something better adapted to the wonders of the deep. One of the largest watchers approaches, its form so elongated and refined that it seems more like a living current than a discrete being. Its eyes hold depths within depths, and when it looks at you, you feel the weight of ones in that gaze. This one is old beyond imagining. Perhaps one of the original refugees who first discovered this underwater sanctuary and began the long work of adaptation and coral shaping that created the city you now explore. Through its regard, you understand that you are being offered a choice that goes beyond simply remaining in the underwater city. You are being invited to become part of the consciousness that guides its growth, to add your unique perspective and experience to the collective wisdom that shapes its evolution. Your surface, born understanding, so limited in some ways, offers something these beings lack: a fresh viewpoint, new patterns of thought that can contribute to solutions they have not considered in their long isolation. The water around you pulses with anticipation, with welcome, with the promise of wonders still to be discovered. The watcher's bioluminescent displays reach a crescendo of beauty that brings tears to your eyes. Tears that dissolve instantly into the surrounding liquid, but carry with them the salt of your emotion, your gratitude, your growing certainty about the path you wish to choose. You understand now that the watching was never about judgment or evaluation in any conventional sense. It was about timing, about waiting for the moment when your transformation had progressed far enough that you could truly perceive what was being offered, could make an informed choice about your future. The watchers have been patient shepherds, guiding your journey through the coral halls, ensuring that you encountered each wonder in the proper sequence to prepare you for this moment of decision. Behind you, the path back to the surface still exists, though it grows fainter with each passing moment. You could still return to the world of air and harsh light, of solid ground and limited movement, of individual consciousness trapped within the narrow confines of a single skull. The choice remains yours, as it must, for the transformation requires willing participation, conscious acceptance of change. But ahead, deeper into the heart of the coral city, the watchers beckon with promises of integration, of becoming part of something larger and more beautiful than anything the surface world could offer. They promise not the loss of self, but the expansion of self into realms of awareness that your surface born imagination could never have conceived. They offer communion with minds that think in geological time, participation in the slow, patient work of growing beauty from the basic elements of sea and stone. The water carries their invitation to you on currents, that taste of deep minerals and ancient wisdom, of patience beyond measure and love that has been growing like coral for centuries beyond counting. The watchers drift closer, their forms becoming more solid, more real, as if your growing acceptance of their reality makes them more able to interact with yours. The choice is crystallizing in your mind like calcium carbonate forming into coral. And with it comes a peace so profound that you know, with certainty, that transcends rational thought, what your answer will be. The watchers sense your decision before you consciously make it, and their bioluminescent displays pulse with joy that flows through the water like visible music, welcoming you home to a place you never knew existed but have been seeking all your life. The coral walls around you pulse with renewed vitality, and you understand that your choice is already beginning to reshape the city itself, adding new chambers and passages to accommodate the unique perspective you will bring to their ancient community. The watchers close their circle around you, and you feel yourself supported, carried, beloved by beings who have waited patiently for your arrival through centuries of dreaming. The transformation is accelerating now, but you no longer fear it. With the watchers as your guides and companions, you are ready to discover what lies beyond the boundaries of individual consciousness, ready to become part of something eternal and beautiful and vast beyond imagining. Chapter 5: The Eternal Blue. Time has become liquid here, flowing around you and through you like the water that now fills your lungs as naturally as air once did. You cannot say how long you have been part of this underwater realm. The distinction between hours and days, between days and years, has dissolved into the eternal present of the deep. Your body has completed its transformation, your flesh taking on the translucent quality of deep water, your limbs stretching into the elegant proportions that mark the true inhabitants of this coral city. But it is not just your body that has changed. Your consciousness has expanded beyond the narrow confines of individual awareness, opening like a flower to encompass the vast, slow thoughts of the coral itself. You think now not just with your transformed brain, but with the living architecture that surrounds you. Your awareness distributed through miles of interconnected coral formations that pulse with shared intelligence. The silence here is not empty. It is full of the deepest music you have ever heard. Your heartbeat, once so private and internal, now echoes through the water as part of a greater symphony. The rhythm of your pulse harmonizes with the slow breathing of the coral, with the patient circulation of currents that carry life through the city's veins, with the measured beat of waves far above that mark time on scales your surface born mind could never have comprehended. You drift through chambers that grow and change in response to your presence. The living architecture adapting itself to accommodate your unique perspective. The particular quality of consciousness you bring to the collective. The coral walls pulse with colors that have no names in any surface language. Hues born of pressure and mineral, and the slow accumulation of centuries. Shades that exist only in the deepest waters where light itself learns to behave differently. The other inhabitants of the city, you can no longer think of them as watchers, for you are one of them now. Drift through the liquid spaces with a grace that you too have mastered. Your movements through the water have become dance, each gesture flowing into the next in patterns that express the joy of perfect adaptation to environment. When you swim, if swimming is the right word for this effortless navigation through three-dimensional space, trails of bioluminescence follow your limbs, creating temporary constellations that mark your passage through the eternal blue. You remember, with the clarity of dreams, the surface world you once inhabited. The memories feel ancient now, like stories told about someone else's life. You recall the weight of gravity, the harsh brightness of unfiltered sunlight, the struggle for breath in thin air that seemed always insufficient. That existence seems impossibly crude now, like trying to live with only a fraction of your senses, like experiencing reality through thick glass that distorts everything it touches. Here in the deep, you perceive the full spectrum of existence. Through your transformed senses, you feel the subtle pressure changes that speak of weather systems hundreds of miles away. You taste in the water the chemical signatures of distant volcanic events, of glacial melting, of the slow circulation of ocean currents that connect this hidden city to every body of water on the planet. You are part of a vast network of awareness that spans the globe, touching every drop of water in the world's oceans. The coral city continues to grow around you, its expansion guided now not just by the ancient intelligence that first shaped it, but by your contributions as well. Your surface born perspective has added new elements to the collective consciousness, new patterns of growth that create chambers and passages unlike any that existed before your arrival. The architecture learns from you, incorporating your memories of sky and wind and growing things into forms that could exist only underwater, translating surface concepts into deep water poetry. In the newest chambers, coral formations spiral upward in patterns that remind you of trees, though trees that grow in liquid space, their branches extending in directions that gravity would never allow on land. Other formations spread across floors and ceilings like flower gardens. If flowers could be made of living stone and fed on minerals dissolved from the bones of the earth. The city is becoming a hybrid thing, part ancient underwater civilization, part memorial to the surface world you chose to leave behind. Your fellow inhabitants welcome these innovations with the patience of geological time, incorporating them into the city's evolving beauty with the same care they once used to tend the original coral gardens. They understand that change is the nature of life, that adaptation is the secret of survival, that even the most perfect civilization must continue to grow or risk stagnation. Your arrival has awakened something that had been dormant in their collective consciousness, a creative energy that manifests in new forms of coral shaping, new patterns of light and current and architectural impossibility. The boundaries between self and city, between individual and collective, have become as fluid as the water that surrounds you. When you think, the coral thinks with you. Its vast network of living connections amplifying your consciousness until your awareness encompasses chambers and passages miles from your physical form. When the city dreams, you dream with it, sharing visions of continued growth, of new wonders yet to be created, of other surface dwellers who might one day find their way to this underwater sanctuary and choose, as you have chosen, to become part of something larger than themselves. The peace you feel is beyond description, deeper than the deepest trenches, more encompassing than the widest ocean. Here in the eternal blue, surrounded by beauty that grows more complex and wonderful with each passing moment, you have found something that the surface world could never provide: perfect belonging, absolute acceptance, unity with something infinite and patient and infinitely creative. Your heartbeat echoes through the water, no longer just your own, but part of the vast cardiovascular system of the coral city itself. Each pulse sends ripples of awareness through the living architecture, carrying with it your gratitude, your wonder, your deep and abiding love for this place that has become not just your home, but your very being. The city responds with pulses of its own, currents of warmth and light that massage your transformed flesh and remind you constantly that you are cherished, valued, an integral part of something magnificent. Sometimes, in the deepest chambers where the coral grows in formations too complex for any surface-born mind to fully comprehend, you sense the presence of the original builders of this place. They are not gone. Not exactly. They have become so fully integrated with the city's consciousness that they exist more as guiding principles than as separate entities. Their wisdom flows through the coral structure like blood through veins, shaping growth, guiding adaptation, ensuring that the city continues to evolve in directions that serve life rather than destroying it. Through your connection to this ancient wisdom, you understand that the underwater city is more than just a refuge or a sanctuary. It is an experiment, a proof of concept, a demonstration that consciousness can evolve beyond the limitations that seem so absolute from the surface perspective. Here, intelligence has learned to think in geological time, to plan for outcomes that will not manifest for millennia, to create beauty that will endure long after the surface world has forgotten that such places were ever possible. You are part of that experiment now. Your transformed consciousness, adding its unique flavor to the vast soup of collective intelligence that guides the city's growth. Your surface memories, rather than being lost or abandoned, have been integrated into the whole, becoming part of the library of experience that future inhabitants will draw upon when they too make the choice to join this underwater community. The water around you shimmers with possibilities, with potential futures that exist in quantum superposition until the moment when conscious choice collapses them into reality. You sense the approach of other surface dwellers, distant still but drawn by currents both physical and metaphysical, toward this place where transformation is not just possible, but inevitable. Some will turn away when they glimpse what awaits them here, unable to release their attachment to the harsh simplicities of the surface world. But others, those with souls flexible enough to embrace change, will complete the journey and discover, as you have discovered, that evolution is not something that happened in the distant past, but something that continues still, patient and inexorable as the tides. The city pulses around you, its coral walls breathing with rhythms that encompass your own, its chambers expanding and contracting in patterns that suggest vast lungs drawing life from the water itself. You are part of that breathing now, part of the circulation that carries nutrients and consciousness through the living architecture, part of the slow, patient process by which beauty transforms itself into new forms of beauty, each more wonderful than the last. In the eternal blue of this deepest sanctuary, surrounded by minds that think in centuries and coral that grows according to dreams older than human civilization, you have found your true home. The surface world, with its harsh light and brittle air, its gravity and its isolation, feels like a half-remembered nightmare from which you have finally awakened. Here in the deep, consciousness flows like water through coral passages. Individual awareness dissolving and reforming in patterns too complex for surface logic to follow, yet perfectly natural to minds that have learned to think with the rhythm of tides. Your transformed heart beats in harmony with the vast heart of the city, and in that rhythm you hear the promise of eternities yet to come, of wonders still to be discovered, of consciousness evolving toward forms of beauty and awareness that the surface world cannot even imagine. You are home at last, part of the eternal blue that connects all waters, all life, all dreams of what existence might become when freed from the narrow constraints of individual flesh. The coral city dreams around you, and you dream with it, your consciousness flowing through its living passages like blood through veins, like thought through neural networks, like love through the infinite blue spaces of the deep. Time means nothing here. Urgency is a forgotten concept, and beauty grows with the patience of stone and the fluidity of water, creating wonders that will endure long after the surface world has crumbled into dust. You are eternal now, part of something that transcends the brief flicker of individual existence. And in that transcendence you have found not loss, but gain. The expansion of awareness beyond anything you could have imagined in your air-breathing days. The eternal blue embraces you, flows through you, makes you part of its vast circulation of life and consciousness and unending, patient creativity. In the deepest chambers of the coral city, where the walls pulse with the accumulated wisdom of Ons, your transformed voice joins the vast chorus that sings the slow songs of the deep, and the ocean itself listens and smiles and continues its ancient work of turning consciousness into coral, dreams into living architecture, souls into eternal blue.